I am so glad to see everyone here. Okay? I'm so glad to see everyone here tonight. The Marcia Resnick crowd. What a fascinating group of people. Everybody here is an individual person. Everybody here probably loved Marcia in one way or another. I know I did. So anyway, this is going to be a lovely show, thanks to Marcia's sister, JANICE HAHN, sitting in the front row here. And I think that, as I recall, she's got our first guest. Oh no, we have an interview right first, okay. So we're going to start with a, video of Marcia talking. Where is that? Is that coming up?
This is Paul Chinkle's Artifacts. This evening, Artifacts will explore book art. Book art is an alternative art form which is used by artists to express their ideas. At first, Artifacts will speak with Marcia Resnick, a photographer who has made a number of books. And after this talk, Artifacts will visit a symposium on book art organized several weeks ago by Marcia Resnick.
Let me ask you, Marcia, that particular symposium you were organizing at the International Center for Photography on 94th Street, I think it is, wasn't it? What was that about? Do you find it very satisfying to sort of communicate on the level of the book, as it were, on the level of, say, the mass media per se? Do you have any feedback? There's like 3 questions. Can you sort of address yourself to that?
Yeah, I have funny feedback. I get like weird fan letters. Like I got this fan letter from the Photo Club of Estonia, Russia.
Really?
And, yeah, and they said, "Dear Marcia Resnick, we have and love your books, Sea, Landscape, and Tahitian Eve. We are in turn sending you the history of Estonian photography from 1850 to 1950.
Really?
I have this book at home. I really do have it. So I have fans like in the weirdest Podunk, Estonia, like that. I love it.
Is it
I think
a
that's
good
fabulous.
experience? Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's like a joy to go to my mailbox and get these weird fan letters.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that. I love the idea, like I really fantasize about becoming someday like a myth, producing these kind of like obscure books, and then someday like collecting them up and then having lots and lots of obscure books and lots of obscure fans and then being discovered.
Yes.
But then there's another part of me that really is into media, that wants to relate to a larger audience, and the latest book that I'm doing, that I'm trying to get published, I think does that for the first time. It might be for the last time.
What's the content of that particular book? I mean,
The story of my life.
The story of your life?
Yeah.
From birth to age what?
From birth to, well, actually actually from not exactly birth, from more or less, the cover of the book has an image of it, of more or less a little girl or part of a little girl sitting at a table, and on the table is a black and white composition book, a glass of white milk, a bottle of black Bosco. She's wearing white socks. She's wearing black and white saddle shoes. Sitting on little plates are black and white Malamars and there's other black and white cookies. Everything is black and white, and it's more or less a morality play, and it's more or less about the moment that the superego intercedes and we lose our id. So it was from that moment up until like now that the book is.
Who took this picture that you're describing?
I took all the pictures.
Oh, you took all the pictures?
I recreated scenes from my life.
I see. I thought it was like a documentary.
No, it's all it's all
Fantasy.
It's called, the name, it's very important, the name of the book. It's called Revisions, and it's a pun on the word revision because it's revisualization, and it's also, I gave myself the poetic license to revise my past, to kind of juice it up, you know, wherever it was boring.
That's fabulous. I like that idea. Yeah, like when you were 11, there's nothing much happened when you at the age of 11.
Well, a lot of
Maybe
stuff
it might have happened.
Well,
but,
the basic issues, I mean, I deal with howdy doody, you know, like all those like really major things in life, you know, hula hoops and all the stuff, you know, kissing, the facts of life and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very funny book.
How long did?
Marcia at the height of her game, 1977, fantastic. Our next speaker, I believe, is going to be Janice HAHN, right? She's coming up now to the stage, and she's going to tell us a lot of things about Marcia we don't know. Please give a warm hand of welcome to Janice HAHN.
So thank you all for being here. I am an oral cancer survivor, and this is the very first time since in 2017 that I'm speaking in front of an audience. Marcia was a thoroughbred racehorse. I didn't dare to try to keep up with her pace, although I challenged my own reckoning and frantically became a workaholic alongside her, because she inspired me in so many ways through the years, with her creative drive and her curious nature to explore with no boundaries. Challenges were her passion, and they sometimes became mine. She had an innate ability to always have a solution for anything. She was not shy about speaking up and giving you her diligent opinion. That was a sign of her generous spirit. Studying her, Marcia's focus was evident during her early academic years, which was substantiated when she graduated high school as salutatorian to, as we know him today, Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer, who was the valedictorian. Proficient? Yes, very much so, showing promise in everything she attempted. Marcia discovered photography while attending Cooper Union. She especially would love setting up her 35mm camera on her tripod, then setting the timer on delay so she could jump into the frame and join everyone in a group shot. She cleverly composed shots of Mom and Dad and myself on more than one occasion. We've had a lifetime together, amusing ourselves with ridiculous absurdities that we would conjure up, sharing moments of exhilarating laughter. We both loved watching old films and keeping each other in the loop on favorite contemporary ones as well. I remember clearly the day Marcia left home, suitcases in hand, down the steps and out the door. It was 1967, her first year in college at NYU. I was left alone in her room. I looked around. Everything she didn't take with her remained in place. I noticed a corsage that had been on my sister's dresser forever, a Tootsie Roll corsage. Casually, I went over to touch one, and then another, and then another. A Tootsie Roll corsage, realizing that all the Tootsie Roll wrappings were empty. Apparently, Marcia had repuffed the Tootsie Rolls to give the impression that no one had eaten them. Evidence left behind. From then on, I referred to it as the Tootsie Roll caper. Complicated Marcia thrived on her need to be seen and heard. Early in her career, she was eager to aspire to a level of fame for her hard work. But truly, the core of her work was not what it was to relay the message to the world, that art can be good and bad. Marcia lived her life hard and fast, and her struggles defined her art. Determined, energetic, competitive, candid, vocal, visionary, vigilant. These words come to mind. Constantly attentive and responsive to signs of opportunity, activity, or danger. She was that mysterious woman who had the gift of foresight. Her breadth of innovative photographic work proves that she had that gift. She had that hallmark characteristic that set her apart from others, striving to make a difference in a generation when women were burning bras, liberating themselves in a so-called man's world. I've always been proud of my sister, Marcia. I promised her that her legacy will not fade away, and I will make every effort to preserve it. Haroya Akahama was the love of her life. She never found the time to work on the resurgence of his paintings, but dedicated her Bad Boys book, Punks, Poets and Provocateurs, to him. Working closely with Marcia, I had designed that book. And afterward, I was constantly reminding her that I wanted to work with her on a bad girls book. It's still in my thoughts. I've written a screenplay and a book about the dichotomy of our lives. It's going through an editing process right now. The title is Mush, because that was her pen name to me when we were young, subtitled, Shadowing My Sister Behind the Camera. I love Mush more than anyone could imagine. And I will miss her so very, very much. Thank you all.
Isn't there a family video? Isn't it supposed to be a family video now? Janice? Oh, good. Oh, excellent. A family video of Marcia as a small child.
This is how it all began. Sonia and Herbie fell in love. Then, on November 21st, 1950, Marcia showed up. Here's a happy Marcia, 2 years old, with her mom's usual homemade birthday cake. Marcia never had the best table manners and very much resented using silverware. Fingers are like forks, she would say, and persist in eating with her hands. She was also particularly terrible at blowing out candles. The result was often a fine mist of spittle enshrouding her birthday cakes. As a firstborn, Marcia reveled in the attention of her mother. Sonia enjoyed tying up Marcia's hair in pigtails. Here they are, skipping together in the fields. Marcia lived with her family in Mill Basin, a suburban peninsula on the south end of Brooklyn, New York. Address, 85 Barlow Drive North. Marcia's bedroom was situated over the garage. Although she was mortally afraid of clowns, a poster of a clown stared down at her over her bed. In the summers, the Resnicks would take a road trip in the family station wagon to Bud Lake, Pennsylvania. Marcia taught her sister Janice how to make a wish on dandelion bristles. For the magic to be at its best, she would say, you must blow all of them off with one big breath. Sonia was a bit of a fashionista and would make sure that Marcia and the rest of the family were dressed to the nines for all social events. This won't come as a surprise to many, but Marcia loved music. She had 5 years of piano lessons. She practiced religiously as she was told. And it paid off. But years later, she never played again. Niagara Falls, 1963. Marcia playfully pretends to dive into the falls.
Okay, now, the next speaker is POOH. You may know POOH. She's a dancer, some renown. Also, Marcia's closest friend for many years. They met at Cooper Union, and I hope she's here. Are you here, POOH? Oh, there she is. Here she comes. Yeah. We're going to hear some things we don't know about Marcia from POOH. Let's have that little hand.
Okay, well, first you should notice my Marcia tribute. I had written a speech, and it was on my computer, and this morning I opened up the computer and I turned it on and it had disappeared. So this is all going to be ad-libbed, so please forgive me. Okay. It was actually wonderful seeing this footage that we were just watching, because I remember Marcia bringing that footage back to the loft at 530 Canal Street when it first manifested itself in the family, and being so excited and showing me. Why am I looking at myself? Marcia was like intimately in my life for about a decade. We met at Cooper Union. She instantly made herself notice because she was always the smartest person. And she took all, we were the only two people really interested in film in our class. And so we took all film classes. There were actually only I think 3 offered in the 2 years that we were hanging out together. And one of them, well, one was with Hollis Frampton, but one was about neorealism, Italian neorealism. And one of the films we watched was Umberto D by Vittorio De Sica. And it's a story about an elderly man, very careful elderly man, who slowly loses his position in the world and ends up sitting on a loading dock with his little terrier, waiting for something to happen. And at the end of it, I'm crying, I'm blubbering, I'm just falling apart, and Marcia is sitting there, very erect, and she's looking at me with total disgust, and she says, that was so sentimental, how could you possibly be crying about it? Which, actually, the story sticks in my mind because several years later, she took me to see Sallow, a film by Rossellini, and she mentioned that she considered it an antidote for my sentimental mushiness over Umberto D. I always felt like I was learning something from Marcia. She just had that, she always had a smarter edge than I could ever dig up. She introduced me to Richard Foreman in 1974. She introduced me to Yvonne Rainer and the Grand Union Improvisation Group in 1973, and that actually was the inspiration that ended up leading me to become a dancer. She always knew the things to see, what to do, and I was pretty dependent on her for my education of the real art world. We went to Mexico together. We spent 6 months in Mexico in our senior year at Cooper Union. And it was wonderful, I have to say, but also kind of harrowing. For example, we drove down with a couple in their car, and on the first night of driving, the car had an accident. And we drove into the town where we were going to spend the night, and the couple had decided to stay in an expensive hotel, but Marcia and I, being, you know, devilishly carefree and sure that we could handle anything, chose to stay in a really cheap hotel. And we walked into the room, and Marcia lifts up the covers, and there's bed bugs. So we ended up, because we didn't want to try another cheap hotel and lose more money, we ended up sleeping on the beach, which we did on several nights during our journey down. And later, we would often find ourselves sleeping on the floor of bus stations as we were traveling around Mexico. In other words, we had very little money, and we were spending our 6 months on whatever, $2 a day. We drove down to Guatemala, and there was a civil war going on at the time, so there was a massive amount of armed presence of soldiers all along the route. And the bus finally stopped in Guatemala City, and we got off we were going to get off the bus, and I was the person in front, and we needed to know where our hotel was. So I tried to ask in my Spanish, which had been learned from the telenovas on the television. And I'm having a lot of trouble with the difference between left and right. And Marcia just pushes me aside and speaks fluent Spanish because that had been her language in high school. And I was so angry when we got out of the bus that I actually shoved her, and we ended up wrestling on the sidewalk of Guatemala City. And I thought, this is fitting for a country that's in civil war. It was our own civil war. Oh, I broke my glasses. Nah. Anyway, the trip Okay, we got to the border of British Honduras and Guatemala, and it turned out that you had to have a visa to stay in British Honduras, but they would allow you to drive through, pass through it in 48 hours as long as you left at the end of 48 hours. But in order to get into Mexico, it seemed that we were required each to have $150 on us, and we didn't have it. So we had to spend a few days waiting for money to be wired. And Marcia, who, as you can see, is utterly gorgeous and fantastically good at talking to people, found a young man whose father owned an avocado plantation, and he put us up in one of the guest cottages, and he took us out to shoot avocados. And neither of us had ever used a gun. And I missed the avocado by a wide margin, but Marcia shot it right off the branch, first try. God, she, I really miss her. We proceeded, we lived with each other. We moved in with one another when we got back from Mexico in an apartment across from St. Mark's Church on the corner of 11th and 2nd Avenue. And from there, Marcia went on to California to study art, which I think really changed her life, because she studied with John Baldessari and Dwayne Michaels. I mean, she experienced the cutting edge of American photographic thinking there, and she came back a really changed person, someone who had a very liberated permission to think about how you could talk about photography, how you could create a context for photography. And it shows in her work, which I can see, for example, in her book about the landscapes and the loftscapes. I see shades of John Baldessari and his little palm tree photographs. But she put it into a package. She could really create advertising. I mean, a concept to hold something that was just a smell or a scent in the air. And so I think her books are just extraordinary. I mean, I think they're a microcosm of American photography at that time. Oh yeah, the falling in ceiling. Okay, so she always found all our apartments. She was great at it. And so she found us an apartment on the corner of Houston and Elizabeth Street. It was a very old building, built in the late 1700s, and it featured sagging ceilings and caving in walls. And one day, the kitchen ceiling fell down and it squashed. I actually had been typing at the table beneath it, and I had just walked out. It squashed the table and my typewriter. And the pile of mortar is sitting there, but the next day when I come home, it's all been cleaned up, and Marcia had moved it. So here, I brought. So, Marcia had moved all this mortar into her bedroom and created these scenes which she photographed. And, huh? You can see it. Oh, okay. All right. So I have to say this was one of the most influential things for me, for what I became, seeing what she did with this ersatz material lying around the house, how you didn't have to make something special. You didn't have to use something that had been created. You could just use. You could find a way to make a context to use anything. And later in many of my dance pieces, I basically went to this concept for my sets. So I'm totally indebted to her. I bought these photographs from the estate, so I would never forget how much I owe that woman. Okay, that's it. That's my talk.
You know, it's, one of the most interesting things about the relationship between POOH and Marcia Resnick is they actually changed personalities. As I recall, when Marcia first met POOH, Marcia was a person who was very retreated from people. A lot of her time, she did not socialize. POOH socialized a lot, and then this changed completely. So it ended up that Marcia started socializing a lot. So POOH had a much large influence on Marcia than Marcia had on her, in my opinion. Okay, so our next speaker is a really remarkable person, because I have to tell you briefly that in the arc of Marcia's career, she had a fantastic career from 1973 to 1982. And then after that, for a very, very long time, she faded from the photo scene. Then in 2009, the gallerist Deborah Bell, who's going to come up here and talk, discovered her and began a whole new period in her career, which ended up with a wonderful retrospective. Please welcome Deborah Bell. Without Deborah, who knows what would happen.
I have a little speech prepared here. I met Marcia in 2008. The private dealers, Paul Hertzman and Susan Herzig, longtime colleagues of mine in San Francisco, had called me to say that they'd learned about Marcia's work from the photographer Charles Gatewood, whom I knew from New York, but who had since moved to San Francisco. During a recent visit, Paul wisely asked Charles whether there were any photographers whose work he thought was strong and special, but who might have been overlooked in recent years and really should be seen. And Charles raved about Marcia. Paul then discovered that he has Marcia's 1978 book, Revisions, in his library. Paul offered to send me the book to see what I thought about that work and suggested that if I liked it, maybe we could try to get in touch with Marcia and work with her, adding that he thought Marcia lived in New York. When the Revisions book arrived, I vaguely remembered having seen it before, and I loved the pictures. I looked up Marcia in the phone book and called her. I relayed the Charles Gatewood story, and we made a date for me to visit her at her Grove Street apartment. The person I met that day was tender, open, modest, highly intelligent, and almost childlike. Right away, she told me about her family, her friends, her career thus far, about some of the difficulties she'd had in her life, her time as a substitute teacher in the New York City public school system, and about Heroia, whose paintings and objects were everywhere in the apartment. She showed me prints from Revisions and from her many other series. I was floored by the quality of her work, both intellectually and materially. The prints were excellent, and it was clear that she knew how she wanted them to look and what she was doing. I soon made another visit to tell her that we'd love to represent her. I was so excited that she was willing to let me take a group of prints on consignment. Paul and Susan and I got to work planning an exhibition of her Revisions work for 2009, and we published a small brochure to send to clients. We asked Ann Tucker, the former curator of photographs at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, whom we knew had acquired Marcia's work for their collection very early, in the mid-1970s, to write an essay for the brochure. The show opened in March 2009 at my West 25th Street Gallery in Chelsea and was an immediate hit. Gradually, we learned more about the breadth of Marcia's body of work, her other series from the mid-70s, most of which was very conceptual in nature: landscape, loftscape, sea, sea changes, Tahitian Eve, Resnick's Believe It or Not, followed by the great portraits of artists, musicians, poets, and filmmakers that is now known collectively as Bad Boys. About a year later, we presented a Bad Boys exhibition for which we also published a brochure. It was surprising to me to discover that people who were familiar with Marcia's work knew either her early mid-70s conceptual work, partly from the books she published herself, or the Bad Boys, Punks and Poets portraits that she began in the late 70s, but usually not both. Although Marcia was probably better known by this time, 2009, 2010, for the Bad Boys portraits, we were absolutely determined to get the earlier work out there too, especially into museum collections and into the hands of serious private collectors. We were fortunate that Marcia still had a lot of vintage prints, that is, prints made right after she took the pictures, which is what photography collectors and museums wanted. We were thrilled to find that many curators already knew her conceptual series from the shows she's had in New York galleries in the 1970s, including at Jeffrey Deitch's gallery, and from the landmark exhibition at George Eastman House in Rochester called The Extended Document, which took place in 1975, and for which there was a small catalog, and in European galleries such as Wilde and Ricke in Cologne, Germany. It was clear to all that Marcia's work was special and unparalleled, gutsy, smart, and witty. Everyone knew that this was important work. Her reintroduction to the art world, not just the photography world, was exciting for everyone. Vince Aletti, the superb critic of music, photography, and art, visited all of our shows of Marcia's work and our installations at art fairs and wrote brilliantly about her photographs for The New Yorker. Joe Baio and Anne Griffin, collectors who are here this evening, acquired many of her photographs and invited us to wonderful parties in their home. As the pandemic was waning, a dream came true. Frank Goodyear, director of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art in Brunswick, Maine, proposed to plan a retrospective exhibition of Marcia's work. Before Frank and his wife Anne became co-directors at Bowdoin, Frank was a curator of photographs at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. Frank loved Marcia's portraits and had acquired some for the museum's collection. Frank enlisted two other curators, Casey Riley of the Minneapolis Institute of Art and Lisa Hostetler of the George Eastman Museum, to participate in organizing the exhibition. The show began at Bowdoin in 2022 and traveled to Minneapolis and Rochester, New York, in the rest of 2022 and 2023. Marcia was so easy to work with and always appreciative. We were grateful to have her trust and loyalty. The only time there seemed to be any resistance on her part was when the Bowdoin's excellent public relations team made arrangements for Nick Paumgarten of the New Yorker to write a piece about Marcia in advance of the retrospective. The curators wanted me to be present so that I could help a little by showing a few extra prints. Marcia preferred to talk with Nick alone and was not so crazy about my being present, but I finally told her, "Don't worry, I'll just be like Ed McMahon on the Johnny Carson show and sit there at the end of the couch and pipe in if you need me." So it all worked out. Marcia and I thought Nick might not have much time, but he stayed for almost 3 hours. The resulting article about Marcia, published in the New Yorker in February 2022, is a magnificent written portrait of Marcia. The retrospective covered all aspects of Marcia's photography. It was beautifully installed at all 3 venues, and the catalog produced by the curators, which I'm sure you have seen, and if not, I hope you will, because it will be in the library with the show that T organized. The catalog stands as the first scholarly publication about Marcia's entire body of work, which she so deserves and which has placed her firmly in the pantheon of art history where she belongs. It adds to the important work that Victor, Anthony, Janice, and so many others here this evening have already accomplished in order to ensure her legacy. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Oh, we have a video. We have a video. We have a video of Marcia at galleries. Is that
In
correct?
her seat. I remember somebody showing me the underside of desks in school one day, and I was amazed, really amazed. So that is an ode to the undersides of tables and desks everywhere. She secretly lusted for her television idols. Now that's Howdy Doody, who was a television idol of mine when I was like 5. And that's a naughty picture. I really like it. Not wanting to be publicly kissed by a boy, she avoided games of spin the bottle. It's incredible how you can connote action without having anything move. This is my show, Punks, Poets and Provocateurs, at Happening Gallery in New York City. It's a lovely space, and I was very happy to show here. And these are my photographs of John Belushi, only some of my photographs of John Belushi. I took only 2 rolls of film. I consider all of the photographs together like a piece. And these are my 2 favorite photographs. I knew him through Jane Fire from The Erasers, and I met him on several occasions. And one night at AM/PM at 2 in the morning, I saw him, and I said, AM/PM is an after-hours club in New York. I said, when are you going to let me do a photo session? And he said, now. And I didn't believe him. So I kept on having a good time and went home at like 5 in the morning, and lo and behold, there was a limo waiting for me with John Belushi and his entourage. And so he came into my loft in front of the building, came into my loft, and we proceeded to do a photo session. He had been up for a few days. He was very funny in front of the still camera. I thought he would be fluid and know what to do, but he asked for props, so we used a lot of props. I had a ski mask on a mannequin in my studio, and he grabbed that, and beer in a glass, and these sunglasses, and a bandana, and he had a leather jacket. So he took it off and put it on, and he was very expressive. He actually said Lynn Goldsmith would give her eye teeth for this session. So he gave me the session, which was wonderful of him. That was in September of '81. Then in, I guess it was March of '82, he called me on the phone. He was at my friend Christopher Gierke's house after spending a few days doing drugs and then going to the Schwitz in the East Village. And he played the music Fear on the phone. So I didn't know who it was. I just heard Fear. the band. And he said, come on over to Christopher's. So I grabbed the contact sheets, which I had never shown him, and went to Christopher's. And they were doing what was known as the space coke. It was so terrible that nobody would do it, but John Belushi just kept on shoveling it in. And then he had to go to LA, and his limo came. So, also he asked for the telephone number of, coincidentally, the girl who played me in my book, Revisions, who he had met while doing the Blues Brothers movie in Chicago. And he asked for her phone number, so I gave him a card from Revisions with her phone number on the back. So he's running down the stairs. I handed him the 2 contact sheets. He took them, looked at them, and said, these are terrible, and handed them back. He kept running down the stairs. And about 3 days later, he died. It was, he did call my friend. Bob Woodward interviewed me for Wired, the book, The Short Life and Times of John Belushi. And there's like practically a whole chapter on my photo session. And in the book he uses some of my photos, and one of the photos in the book is of John's, the nightstand next to the bed at Chateau Montmartre, and my card from Revisions is sitting there as one of the objects on his nightstand.
Hi, I'm Penny Arcade. I really wish...
The next speaker, particularly interesting. When Marcia did her book, Revisions, the book which is most remembered, probably her single greatest work, she employed 2 young women to work with her as models. One was called Laurel Rubin, the other one was called Amanda Rubin. And Amanda Rubin is here tonight to tell us a little about her experience working with Marcia on this seminal project. Where is Amanda? Amanda, up you come. Amanda Rubin.
I met Marcia, and she always wore miniskirts and the cutest little cowboy boots. And it took me about 10 years to find somebody to make me boots like Marcia. Could everybody hear that? No? Okay. When I met Marcia, I was at NYU. I was a country bumpkin. I was a runaway. My sister Laurel was a runaway. We came to live with my father in New York. And I went to NYU. I had only been in the city a few years. And I didn't know I was interested in photography. And somehow they had built a new photography center. And I went there. And I signed up for a beginner class. And I walked in, and my teacher was Marcia Resnick. And it was an amazing, beautiful experience. She was so encouraging, so present, so smart. And it was right in the era where punk was happening and conceptual art was happening, and she knew everything about it. She knew everyone. And she taught us. She took us to a Warhol person, Jackie Curtis's house for a party. She would take us for walks in the street. She was just so dynamic, and I never knew I had a vision, and Marcia was so encouraging and helped me, and the more I was freeing myself from all the stuff I grew up with, the happier I was, and the happier she was. She really was by my side a lot. She was also adorable. What I had mentioned was when I saw her, she'd wear these little mini skirts, and she was always so pretty and so cute, but with a really whip-smart brain, and she had cowboy boots like I'm wearing. And I lusted after those boots forever. It took me about 10 years to find somebody to make them. So I hardly wear them, but I love them, and it was because of Marcia. Let me see what else I was going to say. Her loft on Canal Street. I love that. She invited me over for some reason. I have no idea how I got there. Maybe she invited the whole group of us students. She only drank like diet soda and black coffee with 16 saccharin pills fizzing in them. There was never any food there, but it was big and funky and a little bit cold, but fun. And she gave me and my sister a second home. We were really fragile kids. And I introduced Marcia to Laurel, and they were both like almost Lolita types. You know, they were so pretty and so femmy and so little girlish, which was so different than me, and they just flashed on each other. And when I would go visit, I met POOH there, so it was so exciting to hear you speak tonight. I felt part of the city. I felt like my whole life had changed from being in this horrible, freezing, upstate, monstrous home to being with Marcia, and the city was her life, and she was into everything. She was so, so smart, and she was a friend. And one day she had asked if Laurel and I would be in her book, and Laurel was petite, just like Marcia. Laurel is off in the body in revisions, and they kind of had that same energy, and there was really a good bond. And of course, want to be in a book, I was thrilled. So I was mostly her hands, and the cantaloupe picture, I was also her lips. And then there was a big person in a corner in a blanket. I was a homeless person, so I was once her body. But, you know, Laurel really was in the mini skirts and the cute things and kissing Howdy Doody. And we really, really had a blast doing that. Anytime I saw Marcia for years after, we felt like good and old friends, and it was wonderful. And I have to, you know, I wrote a lot of stuff about this, but what I wanted to say was what happened here just a few minutes ago.
Remember how much she got from Laurel in the age thing?
Oh, yes, well, Laurel was 17, and Marcia felt, oh, God, you gave me the best quote, and God knows where it was, but she really flashed with Laurel, that Laurel was like Marcia at 14, you know, her 14-year-old self. Laurel was very beautiful and very fragile emotionally and had a banging body, which is too much for a pretty little girl to have. And Marcia really had an identification with her, so making revisions was very exciting for Marcia. She was very into it, and Laurel and I were thrilled. I even brought one of my boyfriends over, and she put him in pantyhose. I don't know how the heck she got it, but people would say yes to Marcia. It was very funny. But anytime we saw each other over the decades, we were always happy to see her. And the last time I saw her was at the April APAD show, and I gave her a ride home in a cab, and we had a great discussion. She was a sweetheart, but always that same, the hair, the eyes, the little girl look, and that killer brain of hers, and that amazing talent. And I was reminded when I saw the photos, I think it's C where she's shooting everybody from behind. I have a fixation with shooting people from behind. Marcia is in my blood. She gave me a home, she loved me, I loved her. And she also, you know, we did something really creative together. All her stories were great. But I'm gonna share something that I didn't know I would share. Just a few minutes ago, when Marcia was talking about John Belushi, she told how my sister met John Belushi and how he asked for my sister's number. And my sister is so, so private. She would never discuss it with me. So my sister lives in California now. So I now understand the secret that my sister could not say. So you can only imagine how my mind is blowing. But I can't say enough good things about her. It was an incredible experience. It was like I was gifted to be at this big giant school like NYU and find this intimate, amazing, brilliant, fun, pretty, silly woman who, you know, brought so many things to light and activated my creativity and really was like, in this little bitty adorable person, was almost like a mother because she really was by my side and helpful in everything. So my sister and her had a very, very deep relationship. I didn't feel left out at all. There was enough to go around with Marcia. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here, and we will all miss her. We love her.
What is going to happen next? It's a big surprise to me. Oh my gosh. The next person to speak is called Beth Lasch. Beth Lasch made some wonderful interviews and video things with Marcia. And I'd love to hear what she has to say about it. Where is Beth? Beth Lasch, come on. All right. Where are you? Oh, hello. What a wonderful entrance.
Thank you, Janice. Good evening. I just want to ask the crew to roll tape.
This one with a bead of sweat coming down his forehead. That was actually the last picture of the 2 rolls that I took, but this is my favorite picture.
Good evening. Marcia was someone I wanted to document for my show F Sharp TV and talk with her about how female photographic artists does business and gets published. Even though Marcia hated talking about business, she was one of the best at it while staying true to her art. Marcia, and working with her, I saw how she never questioned which way to move forward when she was faced with a choice in her art. She knew right away if something worked or it didn't work. Then she moved on, never second-guessing her decisions. She took the time to consider her limitations, make her choices, and then continue on with confidence, even if it took years or decades. Starting in 1974, Marcia published books. She said she did that in part to disperse her art. She liked photographing sequences and then turning them into art books. In all, she published 10 books. In looking back at the interviews I did with Marcia, there was a running concept that has appeared to me. All of her work was intended to create a visual experience, different ways of seeing and interpreting visual concepts. In her first book, she presented a way of looking at landscapes, showing minimal amounts of land. Then, in her work called Landscape Loftscape, she created landscapes, recreating the image and imitating the original picture. But it was made very crudely. She would use construction paper, twigs, sand, chocolate jellies, just to name a few of her props, thereby creating a visual experience. In her book C, she only shows people from the back. Here, the landscape starts out close to the subject and then gets further away as you flip the pages. She ends with the subject looking at the Grand Canyon, so the book C is its own visual experience. Revisions was a re-visualization of her youth, and each image was designed to capture her interpretation of those moments. The theater-like images were created in her loft, essentially making theater in a frame. Once again, there are no faces in this book. She puts one focus on what you're looking at within the frame and another focus on the poetic way she wrote the text. She would say about the writing at the bottom, "They're not captions, they're equally important." And Marcia, she continued her visual concepts when she was at Soho News writing Resnick's Believe It or Not. This time, the random photo combined with random text were made to challenge what you were seeing, and these were hysterical. Marcia chose to do portraits next. Now she concentrated on photographing the face and the full portrait. It turns out she captured her take on the Beat generation, the Warhol generation of the 60s, and then the punk generation through the 70s. In her Bad Boys book, Punks, Poets and Provocateurs, the layout is another visual experience within the pages. So here again, the photos are one experience, and then the layout and writing are another, also meant to be equal visual experiences for each profile. There was a strong support around Marcia from her family and friends. It helped her confidence grow. I personally am grateful for the support Marcia's family gave over her entire life. They never questioned her projects either. If that's what she chose, they supported her with love. So I didn't see Marcia doubt herself. She was true to her concepts and to her visions, and then brought those visions to fruition no matter how long it took. That outside embrace cannot be discounted. I said to Marcia once how stressed out I was about my projects taking so many years to complete. She said, "The Orange Flags project in Central Park took 27 years before it was done. So you have lots of time, keep going. Gotta have stick-to-itiveness if you want to live as an artist." Marcia worked with dedication, perseverance, and complete authenticity no matter what. Her work was so alive, so profound, and I am so thankful that I kept up with her. It's been a powerful experience. I will forever treasure our time together. Thank you, dear Marcia.
She was mortally afraid of clowns. I was afraid of clowns. And my grandfather would bring me to the amusement park and stick me into the clown's face going, "What are you afraid of?" You know, people really didn't know how to raise children. This was during Dr. Spock and everything that he said. It's incredible how you can connote action without having anything move.
Oh, very exciting. The next speaker is one of my favorite New York poets, Max BLAGG. Max had a long relationship with Marcia. Max is a bad boy. Where is he? Come on, just introduce me. What are you doing, standing there like an idiot? Come on. Max is a bad boy.
Thank you. Every time I get up these days, I feel like Neil Armstrong getting out of the capsule, you know? Okay, this is a prose poem for Marcia. It takes place mostly in the early days of the 70s and 80s. I first met Marcia on Canal Street in New York City, emerging from Dave's luncheonette at 3 a.m., surrounded by a motley crew, all dressed in post-beatnik black, ragamuffin squadron fresh from the Mud Club. Marcia shone brighter in a short plaid skirt and red sweater. Was it red? In my mind, it was red and soft as cashmere. It matched her lipstick. Opera red by Revlon. I looked it up. She greeted me with a mile-wide smile, and I soon found out this magnetic sister, dressed like a China doll, was a two-fisted feminista, more likely to be amused by her suitors than used as a muse. I say that again. More likely to be amused by her suitors than used as a muse. It was 1979, and everyone we loved was still alive. I saw her again on Canal Street in the daytime, looking juicy, shopping for a gas mask at the Army surplus store, a prop for her weekly photo column in the Soho News. She was always working, pointing her Leica like a pistol. It was the beginning of her epic series on the punks and drunks and poets who attended the night schools, then in furious session at 77 White, Tier 3, Barnabas Rex, 3 Roses, the Baby Doll Lounge. The few spots that catered to this impecunious crowd. In her white light late night studio down by the river, all the Lost Boys paused in their cavorting and submitted freely to her all-seeing eye, madness enough for everyone. She knew where she was going, which way her train was rolling, striding over cobblestones in fishnets and heels, avoiding every landmine. She didn't have the time. Landmine, get it? Not landmine, landmine. Avoiding every landmine, she didn't have the time, just kept dancing like it's swing time, choosing the pretty and the studly and the pretty ugly, lining up the posers and the provocateurs. Marcia, sorry, my breath is really off tonight. Marcia slowly built her book, Vision Unimpaired, giving every lucky sitter much more than they deserved. She persuaded me to disrobe, said it was for playgirls, said I would get paid and get laid. That never happened, though she made me look good in my Red Riding Hood. We eventually lost touch because speed and smack don't mix. I was babbling nonsense and she was in a fix. So many close friends dying. Hiroya Akihama, her great love, she would have saved him if she could. And later Johnny Thunders, Robert Quine, and several other sparks divine. And then along came Victor. He rubbed her Jesus spot, worshipped this fatal muse with everything he'd got, bathed her pain, stroked her brain, fed her milk and roses, fine organic food to cool her mercurial psychosis. All survivors by now, there's a lot of us out there tonight, all survivors by now have learned the bitter song. The best get taken early while the scumbags live too long. Kissinger, Cheney, you can name them. It was my good fortune to befriend such kindred spirits, to be alive in that amazing time, carousing in the mud, extracting lotus from the slime. No money, just honey. Honey on the tongue, art on the walls, clothes on the floor, everybody stoned and stony broke, but we were never poor. Farewell, darling Marcia, and be guided on your journey by nights of ghosts and shadows, and these words from Ursanar. She will recognize the way, and the guardians at the gate will let her pass, and she will come and go among those who love her for millions of days. Thanks.
Hey, stop.
Shouldn't you take over the MC? I was so good.
Yeah, okay. So I got to take a little break, so.
No,
Yeah,
he
you-
needs to go pee. I understand that.
So I got to give a big speech. You want to just this?
Baby Buell.
No, not Baby Buell.
What? Yes, it
Beth
is.
Lasch is going to come and read. So introduce Baby Bill.
Yes.
And then introduce Margaret Fox, and I should be back, okay?
Yeah.
Can you handle it?
Am
Please,
I
please.
doing this now or you?
No, you ain't. I have to go.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name's Max Blagg. I'm your MC for the moment. Our next speaker is BEBE BUELL. Is she here? Yes or no? I'm sorry? Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hi, Beth. Beth will be reading for BEBE BUELL.
Buell. Yes.
Who I once tried to pick up, but she wasn't having any.
I'm reading for BEBE Buell. I couldn't make it tonight. We had an instant connection. The second I met Marcia with my boyfriend, then Stiv Baders, the creative sparks flew. She photographed us together in 1978-79 at the photos, and the photos still resonate today, reflecting a time in New York City pop culture that will never be duplicated. Marcia had her finger on the pulse of New York's underground, upper ground, and the dark corners of our eclectic scene. The picture she took of my daughter and I ended up in the cover of the Soho Weekly News. It was Liv's first cover at only 3 years old, and the humor of it all was the mask she was sporting. It was one of Marcia's many toy collections, and the donkey mask was Liv's favorite. Like all great art, it offended some people, but we knew the innocence of the moment. Liv keeps it framed in her home, as I do also. Marcia changed my life, and for decades, her loyalty to me as a friend never wavered. She came to me at every live show I did in my New York City, as I recently played at Joe's Pubs a few years ago. She brought me love, support, gifts of photos, and her beautiful light and smile. Yes, we clicked, and I did some of my best work in my life as a photography subject with my friend Marcia. We also had lots of secrets, which I'll never tell, and logged hours on the phone when either of us needed advice or just an ear. I feel you all around me, Marcia, and you will stay in my soul until we meet again. I can't wait to experience an astral photo shoot. My deepest condolences to all who knew and loved Marcia. She was a diamond in the rough and a pioneer of huge proportion. She was a gift to art and heart.
I'm standing in for Victor still. The next speaker is Margaret Fox, who was Marcia's photography student in the 1970s.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to reminisce about Marcia. Marcia's photo class was my introduction to the arts. Before I studied with her, I had never been to an art museum. I grew up in an Archie Bunker-type family in Queens, and I was an information operator for the phone company. I was fortunate enough to go attend Queens College for $46 a semester. As my professor, Marcia was unique and cool, and her photography class was exciting, and it was the highlight of my college experience. I clearly remember Marcia wearing denim overalls with a matching denim jacket. Her developer-stained fingers were covered with rings, and she wore small plastic barrettes on the sides of her head. During class, she ate candy from a huge bag that she had brought with her. Each week, Marcia would arrive at class carrying a pile of photo books from the library that weighed more than she did. Poring over the books with her was our intro to photo history. We learned about the purist Ansel Adams and the conceptual artists Ed Ruscha, Robert Cumming, and Vito Acconci. Those conceptual artists were a major influence on Marcia and in turn influenced her students. Artist books were becoming popular, and Marcia was at the forefront. During that time, she self-published Tahitian Eve, Sea, and Landscape to disseminate her artwork. In our Photo 1 class, we learned the basics of shooting, developing black and white film, and enlarging prints in the darkroom. Marcia's assignments included a self-portrait series. She wanted us to experience being in front of the camera before giving us the assignment to photograph people. She definitely wanted us to let subjects know that we were being photographed and to ask permission if they were strangers. Other projects included a series of postcards and a cohesive sequence of images. After taking Photo 1, I continued with Photo 2 and then an independent study. By the time I registered for her independent study, I was hooked and knew photography was going to be in my future. Marcia recommended studying at her alma mater, Cal Arts, or the Visual Studies Workshop. I chose VSW And as one of my mentors, I invited her to be a guest speaker in 1978. Most students at VSW took themselves too seriously. And as Marcia presented slides from her autobiographical book, Revisions, which is a collection of ironic and humorous staged photos and text about her female adolescence, only a few of us laughed along with her and appreciated her sense of humor. A heartwarming anecdote from that visit to Rochester was lending her my red and white striped footed pajamas to sleep in. I earned my living by photographing for arts organizations and corporations, including the American Federation for the Arts, the David Rockefeller Creative Arts Center, and Regeneron. I also show my art photography in various exhibitions and am a NIFA Fellow. Marcia taught me well. If Marcia hadn't sparked my passion for image making, I wonder where my life's path might have taken me. I am grateful for her and to her role in making it more interesting. Thank you.
And the next person to speak is Victor Bockris. I'm glad to be here. I met Marcia at a fantastic moment in her life. It was the fall of 1977. When I met her, she had just finished Revisions. She was looking to get quotes for that cover. And she had begun what was then called Bad Boys. She'd taken photographs of the Talking Heads and James Chance. Okay? As an indication of the relationship we would have for 48 years, on our second meeting, we started working together. She took my portrait, and I interviewed her. And interesting thing about the portrait was really wonderful, and it was appeared in her book and in many other places. But the interview I did with her was particularly interesting because she told me about a trip she had just taken to Egypt, where she'd somehow become involved with an Egyptian man, a Hamdi, who had a bullet in his head from the war with Israel. So she didn't let him know about her background. But basically, the relationship was based on him locking her up in his mother's apartment and not letting her go out because he said, if you go out, the brutos and asesinos will get you. And Marcia sort of took this as a catalytic moment to decide to confront what confused her most after herself. She confronted herself in Revisions. She confronted men in what became called punks, poets, and provocateurs, originally Bad Boys. When Marcia stepped into the Bad Boys project, she also stepped into the same time into punk. Before this, she'd been largely associated with the Soho art world. She was a close friend of William Wegman, who was quite an influence on her. Her humor, which a lot of people frowned on in a serious photographer, certainly was somewhat influenced by Wegman. But there was never a movement more suited to Marcia than punk. In 1973, she wrote the fabulous line, "My name is Marcia the Mash. Yes, that is my name. I love to slash about and desecrate. I love all that is profane." She was a natural punk. Now, the punk world is very different than what people think of it or remember it as. Punk was an extremely positive movement. There was nothing negative about punk, except that being a new movement, it tried to dismiss what came before, which all new art movements do. But Marcia dived deep into punk. And two things happened. First of all, she developed a new way of I have to start. She had collaborated with Laurel on Revisions, right? But in this book, she confronted rather than collaborated. And to her, a photo session was kind of a conversation. It's important to understand that Marcia believed, as much as actually taking a portrait, was to get to know the people she was photographing. And so she got very involved in this whole punk world, which is exhilarating and fantastic, because when she got involved in '77, it was just really going big. It was going international, you know. And all the people in punk worked really hard and constantly what they were doing, as did Marcia. Marcia may have been one of the hardest working artists in New York at that time, because you have to remember that as well as taking a series of photos, which she did every week, several sessions a week, she's also teaching, and she was a great teacher. She also had 5 shows in 1977, but there was a trap in what she did, because as I think Patrick Fox wrote a wonderful thing about this, he pointed out that Marcia's photograph achieved a huge amount. There's an anthropological aspect to them. There's a sense of capturing a generation, the sense of capturing a light and an aura. But the main point of them was the step of seduction. She saw a photo session as a seduction. The point being that at the moment of success, she would get the photograph of the man. And if you look at a lot of her photographs in this book, you'll see they're looking right into the camera, right into her eyes. She captures that moment. That's what makes those pictures successful, wonderfully successful. I'd like to tell a couple of stories, because I think telling stories about Marcia is a very good idea. In March of 1980, I had the extraordinary opportunity of hosting a dinner party at William Burroughs' bunker for Mick Jagger and his girlfriend Jerry Hall and Andy Warhol. So this dinner party consisted of William Burroughs, the head of the table, myself, Warhol, Jagger, Jerry Hall, Marcia, and Liz Derringer, who had set the whole thing up through mutual friendship, right? This situation, which I thought was going to be the absolute highlight of my whole journey in writing a book about William Burroughs by tape recording conversations over dinner, was the biggest disaster I ever was involved in. It was an absolute disaster. Because the reason was, because David Dalton, you may have heard of David Dalton, a great rock and roll writer, had a contract to edit a book celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Rolling Stones. Right? And Bill had been told by David Dalton that the Rolling Stones are very keen to have him involved in the book. Originally, we were going to interview Keith Richards, would have been a good idea. But it turned out that the last thing in the world Mick Jagger wanted to have William Burroughs' name involved with the Rolling Stones, because this was shortly after the very famous bust of Keith Richards for heroin in Toronto. It wasn't even quite settled yet. So when he came in, rather than going, "How you doing?" he says, "What's this about?" And, you know, it was hard to make any kind of contact with him. It was very, very embarrassing. And Andy Warhol was very angry with me the next day because I put him in difficulty. However, one person made contact with Mick Jagger, and that was Marcia. I had told Marcia, I said to Marcia, "Do not take any photographs until I signaled you," because when you're having a dinner party, you don't want someone jumping up and running out and taking pictures, right? But as she saw the whole thing collapsing and realized at any moment they could leave, she jumped up and started taking pictures. At which point Mick Jagger said, "What's Marcia Resnick doing?" And there ensued a wonderful dialogue between them, in which Marcia was trying to tell Mick about Lisa Lyon, who she'd photographed recently. And she said, "You know, she's normal like us." And Mick Jagger said, "You think you're normal?" And Jerry said, "You think you're normal?" You're not normal. Anyway, it's a wonderful moment because Marcia got the most out of the evening. It was supposed to be my success, but it was Marcia. She got like 25 great photographs published millions of times all over the world. And she, you know, I felt so stupid. I didn't put her where I was sitting instead of, and I should have sat down at the end of the table and been quiet. Another story I want to tell you is that on her birthday in 1979, November the 21st, right? That's right? November the 21st? Yeah. So on November the 21st, 1979, she called me up and she said that I'm now, at this point, Johnny Thunders was living with her. But don't get carried away and think this was some great romance. It wasn't. They had a sort of brother and sister collaborative relationship, which he loved to dress up. She loved to take pictures of him. He had nowhere to live. That's what that was about. But she calls me up and she says, I'm going out with Johnny and I wish you could come too. I thought, what a fabulous idea. Am I going to say no? I mean, I never met Johnny. So I went over to her apartment on 530 Canal Street, right? And I came in, and immediately Johnny said, so I thought you would hate me, man. I said, no, I don't hate you, man. Don't worry about it, it's fine. So we get into a cab, and we start this evening. And we're going, I don't know where we're going, right? But Johnny is going like, how many bags do you want, man? You want a bag? I'll get a bag. She says, do you want a bag? She says to the cab driver, I'll get 3 bags. He's talking about bags of dope, right? And I really didn't know what was going on. So anyway, we stop at the bodega, hops out, comes back with 5 or 6 bags of dope. And then we go to an apartment that apparently he occasionally used as a place to live. And we're sitting around, we did a little dope, we're all happy. And there's this huge vat of boiling sort of like gunk, like sausages, bits of shit, you know, so we're sitting around. And much to my, so people, they start eating this stuff, right? So, and then Johnny falls right into the soup. And Marcia pulls him out and says, I do this all the time. And she drags him across the floor. His pants fall off, meanwhile. And she throws him onto a mattress, right? And then later on that evening, we return to her apartment. The 3 of us return to her place. And, you know, it's late. And I'm doing that thing of helping Marcia to take off her boots. You know, she's putting her leg up, and I'm pulling the boot off. And Thunder says, hey, man, that's my call, man. Pushes me aside. He's going to take her boot off, but he can't take it off. He falls over. And the wonderful last image of that evening is that even though Marcia told me they didn't have a sexual relationship, as I'm sort of saying, goodbye, thanks a lot, he's scooping up all these ice cubes and ramming up her dress. It's really a very weird image and stuff. That was one of the most exciting nights I ever had with Marcia Resnick. What really impressed me about her was that she lived a much fuller life than anyone I know, way, way fuller than my life. I thought I was pretty hot. I thought, I'm doing a lot of cool stuff. But I would in 1 year write a book. She would write 2 books, have 5 shows, teach 2 courses in 2 different universities, travel to Europe during the summer, and have a number of affairs with people. And when I say that, what I mean is she would get involved with people because she believed that she should learn about the people she photographed. And half of her work was getting involved with people, not just taking that picture, but getting involved in that whole world. And that's why many years later, when Luc Santé wrote that piece in the New York Times that ran Marcia's photograph in 2003, he said she was the soul of the scene. She was the soul of the scene. Marcia was the soul of the scene because she was a pure artist. She was completely committed to what she did. She was a terrific photographer. In every situation, whatever it was, she knew what she was doing, and she did it brilliantly. She gave herself to the scene. She dived deep into punk, and probably knew more about it than anyone I know. And I'm just so impressed by that, by her total commitment to what she was doing. However, when you look back at her, this famous career she had from 1973 to 1982, the first half of it, the first 5 years, dedicated to conceptual art. She published 5 books in conceptual art, ending with the revisions. And the other 5 years was dedicated to portrait photography, and she published 1 book. but it's a big book. It's a great book. And, you know, a lot of people think that the conceptual art is more important than the portraiture. Regardless of that, I think that, you know, when you look back at her work, it's breathtaking. And there's one thing I want to add to all this, which is that very few people recognize the extent to which Marcia was also a writer. She was a very good writer. In revisions, you have to read the sentence first, then you look at the picture. For example, "You're a woman now," her mother roared, and she fainted. How many of you remember that wonderful picture of the girl lying on the ground with her dress put over her face in revisions? That was actually Marcia, not Laura Rubin. And the fascinating thing about that was that the image she created in that particular picture is the image of the girl who stood up and walked into the next book. Marcia's role as the so-called punk Lolita, the girl who took all those portraits, who got that moment of seduction, that really got the shot she wanted, is just, you know, and it's like a remarkable journey she took and stuff. And, you know, you can look back at it now and say, oh, what a wonderful time she had. But in fact, the time she spent on that project ended up very badly, because for a long time, you know, she opened herself to punk. She got totally involved in punk. She got involved with a lot of guys in punk, and it was good. It was good. But near the end, it wasn't so good. She married a man who she was in love with, Wayne Kramer. He was a junkie and a serial fucker. If she believed he was going to change for her, she was delusional. I told her at the time. And he carried on living life, and he broke her heart. And she had a number of relationships in the latter stage of this, pretty much in '82, where she got badly hurt. And part of the reason she had a very long layoff for photographers, as far as we know, is because she was damaged. She was damaged by the hard living, damaged by the deep involvement with drugs. I don't want to pretend that Marcia was not a drug addict. She was a drug addict. Many people were in those days. It wasn't considered that bad to be a drug addict. But in the long run, you know, you spend a great deal of your energy and your artistic and you believe that this drug will help you get what you want, and it does to a certain extent, but there's a very high price you pay. And unfortunately, Marcia suffered very much from that. On the other hand, very few people recover from heroin addiction, are able to continue a worthwhile life and career, and she did. She did. She was able to overcome the addiction, and she was able to return to the fray with the help of Deborah Bell and other people who appreciated her work. And you know, so the arc of her life is a fantastic education. She had an education that's unbelievable. She kept all of her school papers from the time she was in junior high school through Cal Arts. It's a huge, hundreds and hundreds of pages of her writing in the archive. It's amazing. And also, she wrote a lot about the work she was doing in the 70s and 80s. She wrote about revisions and landscapes and portrait photography. And she wrote a lot. And I used to try and encourage her to write a book because she was really a good writer. She had a terrific sense of humor, a sense of a way to deliver a sentence, deliver a paragraph. And she said to me, she said, you know, in the time I have left, I want to spend my time taking pictures. And she did. I've never met in my life, and I'm well known for being involved with Andy Warhol and William Burroughs and Muhammad Ali, et cetera, but I've never met anyone who influenced me as much as Marcia Resnick. But I've never met anyone who, to me, was a brave, courageous person, an amazing person, an intelligence beyond anything I personally have or experienced with other people. Bless Marcia Resnick. Bless her for what she gave all of us. Bless her for the work that remains. And the work has a future. Her work has a big future. It's going to go on and grow. People are going to know more and more about it. I'm writing a book about her. That should tell you everything you need to know. Thank you. Oh, who's next? Yeah. And now we have, oh my God, the next speaker is Ricky Burroughs. Ricky, where's Ricky Burroughs? Come on up, Ricky Burroughs. You may not, well, Ricky has his own fan club and his own life, but he was probably, I have to say, honestly, Marcia's dearest and closest friend during the last 10 years of her life. He's a very important person in her life. Please listen to Ricky Burroughs. Where the hell are you? Oh, I got this thing going. Oh, look at this.
I'm nervous. Anyway, Marcia, after meeting Marcia briefly in the late 70s by a friend of mine who was a Mapplethorpe model, I then, after that, I moved to San Francisco, so I was out of touch. A couple or so decades later, we met again at a party. She didn't remember our first encounter, a fleeting moment on a sunny day walking down Christopher Street, but I did. That night, we found ourselves sitting together on a sofa at the party, talking about photography, people, drugs, and the clubs that we used to go to. What started as small talk quickly deepened. And as we uncovered surprising similarities in our lives, the connection was made. And it became clear that this wasn't going to be just party talk. At one point during the evening, she invited me to the bathroom for a quick line of Coke. And we ended up in the bathroom for about 45 minutes, so it was really good they had two bathrooms at that party. And after a bit of talk, and she popped the question, well, maybe more like ordered the question. She looked at me and said, "We're getting married." And I thought, well, I kind of didn't think. It was just, you know. And she explained that it would be good for both of our careers. My first thought was, well, it'll probably be good for my career. Yours, I'm not so sure of. Still, from that evening, a very special bond was made. I was blessed to have met one of the most extraordinary women I have ever met. Marcia was, as everyone knows, brilliant, talented, and fiercely original. But I want to speak of her on a more personal level, rather than her talents and stuff. Our friendship, as a friendship grew, so our closeness did. We talked on the phone almost every night. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, helped each other out in the small, everyday things around the house and stuff. We became each other's constant dates for events, all events and stuff like that. One day she said to me, "You're my best friend." And I replied to her, "That's because you're mine too." And over the following years, we relied on each other in many situations, had a lot of fun. We even studied together. We took a course at NYU for a certificate in digital photography. We took photos of each other just for fun, becoming each other's confidants. She was a great friend, generous, kind, funny, and so easy to be with and easy to talk to tell her anything, and she had an answer that helped and no judgment. She was my greatest supporter in many ways, especially in my work. She loved my photography and was my biggest encourager. At times, my biggest scolder, telling me, "Get your shit together and get your photos out." And she did that because she knew my hindrances were with getting my work out and known. One of her most remarkable gifts was her empathy. Whenever I was struggling, I told her. She understood it and helped me through it, like she had this uncanny ability to see something within myself that I couldn't see yet and offer comfort in a way that no one else I knew could. During the last blackout, I had been going through one of my deep depressions, and when I go through those, I don't call people, I isolate. And I wasn't answering my phone for a couple days. After 2 days, I heard a knocking on my door, and I opened it up, and guess who was there? Marcia, with her unforgettable, infectious smile and a flashlight and a transistor radio for me. So she got me up and out for a walk and made a darkened city brighter for me. And I bet that a lot of people don't know that Marcia was a big animal lover. She loved holding my cat, Bowie, that was his name, you know after who. Mark, he's like a son to me. He rescued a senior dog, Nina. And I remember once when Marcia was at our place, she picked Nina, the dog, up and looked at us and said, "Should I get a cat?" I don't know, holding a dog. Anyway, I was thankful for having her as my partner in crime. That gratitude hasn't faded. It lives on, as does the ache of missing her. Our friendship was unlike any other I ever had. And there's a quote I found from the poet Paul Valéry. I slightly adjusted it for gender. It goes, a great woman is one who leaves others at a loss after she is gone. For those of us who knew her, admired her work, and cherished her being, this perfectly describes the Marcia Resnick I knew and loved.
Our next speaker played a very important role in Marcia's final months on this earth. T. Wright, who's a student here at Cooper, was Marcia's first real assistant and a magic assistant in so many ways. They had a relationship that was admirable to watch, and I know made Marcia very happy that she was there to work with T. Wright. Is T. Wright in the room? Can T. Wright come up here, please? Here she comes, yeah. A brilliant photographer in her own right, and a terrific person.
I'm also wearing my Marcia shoes tonight. She painted these herself. Marcia was one of the first people I met in the first month when I had moved to New York and my first month at Cooper Union. And spending my first year in this city and at this school with her and the last year of her life was a very special and irreplaceable experience. Marcia was the single most fabulous person I have ever had the privilege to know. Fashionable, funny, and deeply caring, she lit up any room she walked into. Anyone who's ever been around her would know she had an infectious energy. From her punk Lolita style that she kept all her life, to her keen eye and sense of humor, she was truly one of a kind. Knowing and working with Marcia was an immense privilege and irreplaceable experience. We spent hours poring over her negatives and slides side by side over the light table, listening to music, sharing stories, and having a lot of good girl talk. She gave me a lot of important advice, such as don't wear the tall shoes too often, eat more tofu, be meaner to boys, and photograph band members individually for when the band inevitably breaks up. She was a great mentor and a fantastic teacher. She taught me everything I know about photography, lectured me in the ways of her favorite artists, Lucas Samaras and Brian Geisen, and even taught me handwriting analysis of career criminals and serial killers. She had such a way of describing things, like saying when she saw Andy Warhol walk down the street, he'd glitter like an angel. She was amazing with her hands, could fix anything, and constantly helped to keep me out of trouble. When I moved into a new apartment, she built an air conditioner transport device for me out of a cart, twine, and bungee cords. Upon hearing about my roommate trouble, she threatened and quickly followed through on writing a somewhat feminist manifesto against them, math equations included. Over the time we shared together, she became a mother figure to me. She was always there for me to go to and always knew what to say. Her teaching and support got me through my first year in this city and my first year at Cooper. I couldn't have done it without her, and I owe it all to Marcia. During one of the last days we spent together, she came in from the other room, looked at me, and said, "I just had a feeling you were meant to be here. Thank you."
We're almost finished with this wonderful evening, but we have one great thing yet to see, and that is actually two great things. And first of all, we're going to see a film by Greg and Dustin HAHN. Has it got it? What? It says here, 12, Greg and Dustin HAHN. What? Oh, here, oh, good. Okay. Here they are, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. The HAHN brothers.
Yeah, so the film is what we saw, the family
film
earlier with the narration and everything. So we made that. Anyway.
Hi, everybody. If you don't know us, I'm Greg, and this is Dustin.
There have been a lot of speakers today and a lot of people in this room who know Marcia as a friend or an artistic collaborator or both, or both. But we had a very different perspective.
Yeah, but we looked up to her as our cool aunt. And not everyone has an aunt that they can brag about like we did. But as you all know, she wasn't your typical aunt. She was iconic. She was cut from the cloth of this subversive counterculture, and she was a rock star.
Sure, she should have taken many pictures of, she took many pictures of tons of rock stars, but she was a rock star in her own right. While she may have photographed punks, poets, and provocateurs, it can't be overstated that she too encapsulated all of those attributes herself.
Her punk rock style, of course, was a frilly black skirt with Converse high tops, the occasional pigtails, and a teeny tiny backpack purse that somehow managed to contain extra-dimensional space.
It was kind of like a magic bottomless pit filled with all of the necessities, tangled nests of obsolete cell phone charger wires, tchotchkes, expired medications, and rolls of film from 1981 that she just had yet to develop. And when she had to pour it out all to find this like big silvery dangly bracelet, it was like Tim Burton and Dr. Seuss vomited all over the countertop in the living room.
And when she wasn't wearing her signature Converse sneakers, she was stomping around at Thanksgiving dinner in shit-kicking combat boots. Even in her 70s, she was still a rebellious teen with a vendetta against conformity. And like I said, she was so damn cool.
Her apartment was a menagerie of obscurities, like walking into a museum curated by some mad scientist. Oddities from floor to ceiling, art and trinkets and toys, all handpicked to reflect her uncontainable personality.
And sometimes, as we'd peruse her shelves, we'd occasionally spot something that had gone missing from our own collection of curiosities. Her sticky fingers were flattering, in a way.
Yeah, she may not have known which one of our Dick Tracy action figures was adorning her kitchen, but nonetheless, we appreciate that the three of us often shared the same aesthetic. It was prune face, by the way.
A conversation with Aunt Marcia could go one of 1,000 different ways. One moment she'd be regaling us with the details of her latest gallery show, and the next she'd be picking our brains for recommendations on what new odd TV series she can binge. She was always making time for us and never hesitated to let us crash on her couch when we were here in the city.
Speaking of her generosity, Aunt Marcia gave us many gifts. A Canon PowerShot 100 HS camera, which I pretty much use almost everywhere I go.
Yeah, the one and only card that my wife Amanda and I actually saved from our wedding day.
And I doubt we'd ever have seen a live kabuki theater performance if it wasn't for her bringing Haroya to Passover.
Yeah, that was probably the only live kabuki performance in the history of Passover Seders.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
The moment Aunt Marcia walked into a room, that place instantly became 10 times more interesting and 15 times more badass.
Aunt Marcia carried with her a radical, youthful, spontaneous energy, and we can only hope that someday we all have a mugshot as iconic as hers was. We love you, Aunt Marcia.
That was magnificent. I'm so sorry I got it wrong. Anyway, now we're going to have I can hardly read now. We're doing an interview with Marcia by Penny Arcade, correct? Is that next? Bring it on.
I'm Penny Arcade. I really wish I could be there with all of you today celebrating Marcia, but I'm in California working. Marcia Resnick was a 20th century girl. She was a rock and roll spirit. She was a spirit of that era that continued. She connected the ethos of the 60s far into 2025. She was a phenomena. Through the sheer force of her will, she carved out an extraordinarily original way of doing photography as a conceptualist. But she was also a fine art photographer. We all miss Marcia. It's a huge loss to the downtown art scene. You're about to see an excerpt from an interview that Steve Zettner and I did with Marcia in 2022. Where in Brooklyn did you grow up?
Originally Bensonhurst. I lived on Shore Parkway, which had a view of Gravesend Bay. And then beyond that was Coney Island. And I remember getting on the milk box and watching people stuck on top of the parachute jump. It was like pretty enjoyable for me. If I had binoculars, I could see their arms flailing around. When I did Ancestry, I was 100% Russian Jew, European Jew rather. I never heard of anybody who was 100% anything. My mother was a housewife and a painter. She made perfect copies of old master paintings. So I was surrounded when I was growing up with the Mona Lisa and Van Goghs, brushstroke for brushstroke. She painted them impeccably. My father went to Brooklyn College for journalism. He was a printer who had a letterpress shop on Brighton Beach Avenue. He sold art supplies. So there was a lot of encouragement. I was a rebellious kid. As I got older, whenever I went home, my parents were very strict. And they had OCD. You couldn't make a mess or get anything outside that rectangle, which was interesting because I grew up to be a photographer, always imposing that rectangle on the world. Well, I graduated number 2 in a class of like 1,250 students, and number 1 was Chuck Schumer. And I got into all of the colleges I applied to, but NYU gave me a full scholarship, full room and board. I was mostly into politics, studying, drawing, and when I started going to Cooper Union, that's when I got the beginning of my real understanding of art began. And that was the place where I learned about performance art, Charlotte Moore film, experimental film, brackage, and I was making pictorial sort of photographs, like Stieglitz and Steichen. And then I started drawing on translucent paper over the photographs and hand coloring stuff. I felt guilty about just snapping a picture. I had been drawing and painting my whole life, and that took a lot of time. And then, how could I say, click, that's art?
So then you went to Cal Arts.
Yeah. And my mentor was a documentary photographer, and who did not identify with my work at all. Ben Lifson was his name. He was a good photographer. He was very much into Gary Winogrand, and I really appreciated Gary Winogrand, and I appreciated that kind of photography. I couldn't do it. That wasn't me. I always sort of missed the moment. I know that Cartier-Bresson, who was wealthy, could sit there and wait for his decisive moment. But I didn't have patience to sit and wait for the decisive moment. I wanted to create the decisive moment. I was always interested in the democratization of art. that is making artist books. And so I did 3 artist books. One of them was called Landscape. That was my first book. That was inspired by a trip to Carmel, California, where the group of us went in, had a class trip to Ansel Adams' house when he was alive. And so I wandered off from the class, went into his library, and I pulled out what I had just dubbed my favorite book, Lucas Samaris's Auto Polaroids. And I opened it up, and Ansel Adams had scrawled, "This is not photography." At that moment, I hated him. And I also visualized a book with minimal landscapes, less of landscapes than had ever been photographed before in the history of photography. The antithesis of Ansel Adams.
What led to revisions, to you doing revisions?
I had a car in the city. It made me very popular. And so I was driving my station wagon on Jane Street, and I made a left turn onto the West Side Highway. And somebody rear-ended me. I lost control of the power steering. I went into a pole, and I saw my light flash in front of my eyes. And then I went unconscious and woke up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I started doing photographs in the hospital, and I started writing all of the things in my life that flashed in front of me, the ideas down. And so when I got out of the hospital, I started to work on revisions. I was constructing my photographs. I was creating the images to go with what I wrote, and I was constructing my text. And they were, interrelated. They depended on each other, text and image. Humor is very important to me, and revisions has an irony about it. Different things that I sort of noticed about the world, different memories I had about my life. I was mortally afraid of clowns when I was a kid, so it's very strange that I drew this clown. Yeah, my grandfather would bring me to this place called Jolly Rogers in Brooklyn, and he would pick me up, and he would force me near to just look at the clown really close, and I would scream. When I was in my 20s, when I was 25, and I did my book Revisions, one of the photographs is she was mortally afraid of clowns. And I hired this guy to be in my picture. His name was Punch. And of course he fell in love with me. And he also had a little clown that he took with him everywhere called Little Punch. So Punch and Little Punch are in my photograph. And then I had to deal with that for weeks after, because he really liked me a lot.
It was clown love.
In my book Revisions, you don't see any faces. I didn't do any portraits. So I wanted to do portraits again. Also, everybody thought that punks were bad. And in fact, bad boys were fascinated to me, the whole concept of bad boys. Nobody sees that in Punks, Poets and Provocateurs. But it was conceptual. And the book itself, I wanted to have a lot of texts by a lot of the people that were in the book, texts from that time, that from 1977 to 1982. And I think it's a very unique book because everybody was posing for me. It was me behind the camera and them as subjects in front of the camera. I identified with conceptual art from the beginning, yes. I mean, Jackson Pollock, who made marks on canvas by moving his arm around, you know, in arcs, being aware of what it created, what action that created on the canvas. That was, for me, the beginning of that consciousness of creating something. And that's a conceptual thing, okay? That was how my art manifested itself.
It doesn't pay to try. All the smart boys know why. It doesn't mean I didn't try. I just never know why. It's the club all alone. Who, baby, you're not at home. And when I'm home, big deal, I'm still alone. It's a restless I beat my head against the pole. Try to knock some sense down in my bones. And even though they don't show, the scars are so old. And when they go, they let you know you can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. Don't try. Don't try. You're just a bastard kid, and you got no name. 'Cause you're living with me, we're one and the same. And even though they don't show, the scars are so old. And when they go, they let you know. Okay, you can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. Don't try. Don't try.
That was the perfect ending for this wonderful memorial. I'm so glad you all came. We had a wonderful time together, and I'm sure Marcia will be very happy we did this. I have to end with a piece of news that's not so happy. Walter Stedding, a musician and painter who was working with Marcia on her final project, the doll project, was going to play the violin tonight. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, but I'm sure he sends his love to you and his love to Marcia. Thank you so much. Good night.